Hello and welcome to All In, your brand new business show here on Joe, backed by AIB. I'm Yvonne Redmond, and each week on All In, we'll be looking at business news and trends with the help of some of Ireland's most successful business people to help us make sense of it all. And what a cast we have. Our extended roster includes Strong Roots founder Sam Denigan, Cogs and Marvel impresario Jane Gallagher, serial tech entrepreneur Bobby Healy, renowned Irish VC investor Brian Caulfield, and the brains behind Boojum, David Maxwell. But today in our lead roles, maximum media mogul Niall McGarry and beauty cosmetics innovator Marissa Carter of Carter Beauty. We'll also have a very special all-in trailblazer interview with a man who sold his first media company for almost €20 million and has since gone back in a second time with a new media company. We'll get to them in just a moment, but first, since it's our first show, here's a list of all the places you'll find us. Hit subscribe to get your full show each week, available in your feed on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your audio. Subscribe to watch the show on Joe's YouTube. We're at allin_business on Twitter. Check out our new show page on LinkedIn too. The best way to get in touch with us is to tweet or post using the hashtag AllinBusiness.
Joe presents All In, together with AIB, backing Irish business.
So I'm joined by the king of Irish media and the queen of Irish cosmetics. Niall McGarry's media brands have 16 million social followers across Ireland and the UK, while Marissa has 150 beauty products in 26 different countries. You're both very welcome. And as this is called All In, where better to start this series with a focus on what All In means to both of you. Niall, I'll start with you. What does it mean to you?
I suppose all in a business context means making that big decision, that big leap of faith to decide to, leave your job, leave whatever career path you're on to decide to set up your own business. And it's a daunting process, but for me, I kind of believe that it's the key thing every entrepreneur. The first challenge they face is, are they willing to go all in, all out, and that the fear that comes from having nobody else in charge of your destiny, no one else to pay your bills but yourself, is really the quintessential meaning for me of what all in means. But I think business is all about challenges and overcoming challenges. But the first one that really defines whether or not someone's going to be a successful entrepreneur or maybe fall at the first hurdle, because the first hurdle is so big, is that thing of all in. And a lot of people have asked me, what's your number one tip for people who get into business? And I always start with, if you've got a day job and you're trying to set up a business on the side, for me, that doesn't work. You've got to commit to the business on the side if you want it to become big. And you've got to be fair to your employer and say, look, I'm ready to commit to this business. I think thanks for everything. I'm ready to go. So all in for me is all about putting your heart and soul, your interests, your family's interest into this business. And it's a challenge.
And what about you, Marissa?
Well, can I ask a question first?
Go for it.
Do you think that being all in, you have to have gotten rid of your safety net?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
For me, that's a crucial thing, because I think the safety net is what kind of a lot of people go, do you know what, I'll keep doing this thing and I'll try and see if this thing works or not. I think pure entrepreneurs go, look, you've no guarantee whether anything you do is going to work, right? But I think pure entrepreneurs decide, that's it, I'm going for this, full duck or no dinner. And if it doesn't work, and look, recently the government have introduced policies where you can now claim social welfare, whereas obviously that wasn't in place for people. Yeah. So the prospect has become maybe slightly less daunting in recent times. How that law was even in existence is crazy. But for me, Marissa, definitely, I think that's the first thing, is that this is it. If I don't make a go of this, not necessarily, I'm effed, but ultimately, if I don't make a go of this, I've only myself to blame, only my accountant. I think the safety net is what stops people in business.
Would you feel the same?
I don't know if I feel the same. When I was 21 when I became self-employed and went all in, but I think I didn't have anything to lose when I went all in. So it was very different to an entrepreneur, say, remortgaging their house so that they can finance their business.
So the innocence maybe
works
to your favour.
I didn't have anything to lose when I went all in. And then I suppose, 8 years into running my beauty salon, I decided that I was going to launch a self-tanning brand, Coco Brown. And it wasn't until Coco Brown was a year old that I decided that I had enough faith in myself to say, right, I'm going to sell my salon so I can go all in on Coco Brown, because I saw that business was scalable. But it took me a while. It took me a year before I felt confident enough that I could go all in. But I do think that you can go all in terms of the effort and the hard work that you put into your business, and still not reach the level of success that you want to unless your strategy is right. So, for example, if you're trying to get water up a hill, and no matter how hard you try, you're trying to use your hands to get water up the hill, you're not going to get that water up the hill. Your strategy needs to be right. You need to have the right tools and the right buckets to do that. So while I think that being all in is massively important for the success of your business, I do think that your strategy is equally as important.
Well, that's an interesting point you make there, because when I'm not here, I work for a company called Web Summit, and we bring together thousands of the top startups and entrepreneurs around the world to our events. And there's one thing that comes up every single time when we discuss this concept of all in. That audience wants to know from people like yourselves, is there a right way to do it, first and foremost? And secondly, when is the time to do it? And people are waiting for this. Okay, so should I get to X amount of users and then go all in? Should I get to X amount of funding and go all in? How many years in? Okay, when I'm a year in, and should I shut down my beauty? And I'd love to hear from you guys on that. Is there a right way to do it? And if so, when is the time to do it?
But I think like everything, no matter what you're applying yourself to, if you're going learning a foreign language, if you're going taking health and fitness seriously, the first part is, am I committed to this? And I think that's kind of what I mean, and that Marissa's dead right. Like the strategy is the next part, and then within that, then there's going to be a huge amount of other different levels and layers. But as I said, I just think at a base level, committing to anything that you do in life is a core part of the best chance of success. So to go back to your point, Yvonne, about like all these people asking those questions at the Web Summit, you absolutely, that's the first box that needs to be ticked. And then there's a series of even greater and bigger boxes. And I think
funding.
Funding. And I think a lot of people just assume that they assume that you are and are committed fully to your business. But like as you go through the lifespan of your business, you'll have so many challenges. And one of the things I think about the concept of all in is that you will continue to be all in your business. And even if you successfully exit and you get into something new, you're back all in. Or even with the way technology is disrupting every single industry right now, you have got to be always all in. Because one of the key things any entrepreneur or leader needs to do is be able to have skin in the game and understand their business, so that what strategy you had in 2015 is potentially not as relevant in 2020. If you're still working off a 2015 strategy, you're not going to inspire your work colleagues, your staff, your potential customers. You're going to be out of date. So this kind of all-in piece is a constant almost source of replenishment. So I think that, that's just the basics. It's just the commitment. Are you committed to this? But then within that, like entrepreneurs nowadays need to be good at so many things. It's actually difficult because you might get a genius coder who comes along and creates the best app ever, and then you've got all these business people that surround them and money men and women that actually make the whole thing come to life. But for more normal entrepreneurs, you've got to understand, like I was crap at accountancy in school, for instance, but now I've got to understand balance sheets, profit and loss and so on and so forth. And that's not necessarily a skill set that came naturally to me. You've got to understand the space you're in and then where that's going next. You need to be ahead of everybody else in that.
To suddenly manage people.
You have to suddenly manage people. You need to appreciate leadership, culture. You need to hire well. So the entrepreneur these days, and if you talk to investors or you talk to people, they're looking for all of these different strings to the bow, and that's the crucial challenge that entrepreneurs, I think, face more than ever now.
And on the other side of the coin that we just mentioned there, people want to know, when should I do this and how can I do it right? I've also found that at something like Web Summit, all the investors are saying, we won't invest in you if you're not all in. And that means no side day job.
Yeah,
so
I can see where they're coming from, because ultimately if they're cutting a check to put into your business and you're not fully in the business already, they ain't going to cut that check too quickly. So at every level, whether it's a bank funding, whether it's an investor, whether it's venture capital, private equity, you've got to be 100%. You've got to be the most vested person in the business. But modern day entrepreneurs need to know a variety of different things, which I think is a challenge, because as I said, technology is going to continue to disrupt. For me, technology has brought huge opportunity to my business. I don't think we would have built the business we had technology disrupted the media business. However, technology is going to continue to challenge us, and staying ahead of the game is probably the biggest challenge now for everybody. And I know even with Marissa's business, the product will stay the same. I don't think there's anyone going to be in virtual reality applying your tan or your beauty products, but ultimately the channel of which those products now get sourced or get found about has changed. And I think Marissa probably benefited from that already.
And actually, well, Marissa, in terms of what Niall's saying there about the evolution of All In throughout your business's lifespan, you mentioned there at 21 selling up your salon to go all in with the products. What have there been other ways since that you've had to go all in again and continuously? What does that look like?
Well, I think it's important to discuss. I think that we have to discuss the fact that your hard work and your effort and your going all in isn't ultimately going to. It's not ultimately going to be what determines the success of your business. It is important, but rest and rejuvenating and taking time out, that's for me as a creative person when I find I come up with my best ideas. So I think that you can't go 100% full throttle all in all of the time as an entrepreneur. You have to set boundaries. If you don't set boundaries, you'll suffer with things like burnout or just a lack of creativity. So for example, a year and a half ago, I decided that I was taking 3 months off social media, that I needed a break, that it was too much. I was reaching burnout point, and I allowed myself that space, that creative void in which to create a line of makeup products. And I do think that, you know, there is a glorification around being busy and now all in, while I think it's you have to be all in. You can't have too much of a safety net there, or you won't put 100% effort in. But I do think you also need to recognize just how important it is to know when you need to step back, or you will become almost desperate in your search for success as well. So what I've learned over the last, say, 15 years being self-employed is that there's a massive difference between tenacity and pushiness. And I'm in sales, so I create products, and then my next job then is to sell them. So it's to get retailers all around the world to say, yes, we will put your products on our shelves. And I can double my efforts in terms of my presentation. I can spend weeks practicing my pitch. I can spend a fortune on graphics, making sure that my pitch is absolutely perfect, and never work as hard on a pitch, and then go in and pitch to the retailer, and within the first 3 minutes I can be told, no, listen, sorry, your products just aren't right for us at this time. So there's a lot of rejection in business, and you need to be able to know, well, when is the time for me to knock back on that door again? When do I become a little bit pushy? And I think if you're constantly putting yourself in a position where you feel like you need to be all in 100% of the time, then you can become pushy. And there's nothing that's a bigger turn off to retailers or to buyers than meeting somebody who feels like things are a little bit desperate or a little bit pushy. So what I've learned to do is that when things are going really well, that's when you push for more. And when things are really hard, don't push. Just hold on for dear life and just try and stay where you are.
That's good advice. But for both of you, how do you know where that line is, both in terms of pushing the end goal of your business and for yourselves? How do you, we'll say for you, Niall, how do you know when to step back and do the equivalent of what Marissa is talking about?
Yeah, it's harder for me in my line of work because I like to go on Twitter, I like to go on Instagram, right? But as soon as I do, so let's say I go on holiday, as soon as I do, I'm seeing our brands in my feed, I'm seeing our competitors' brands in my feed. So I found that like social media has made our business, yet I think social media has had a huge impact, profound impact, bigger impact than anything else in terms of the despair a lot of people feel towards the modern world. Right? If we look at the political system in America and Britain, like completely created and only could have been created by social media. And people don't enjoy TV anymore. People don't enjoy to the same level because they get distracted. So
do you mean because they're double screening?
Yeah, they're just distracted. I mean, you could go into a wholehearted, and I know obviously we're going off on a tangent here, but like social media obviously has created this challenge where what it does at its core is it creates distraction. So the reality of it is like, you know, TV, radio stations, all these guys come under pressure purely because social media has caused distraction and everyone now is distracted. So I personally, you know, don't enjoy sport as much because I can't concentrate on it because I'm distracted. And obviously, like, TV and so on and so forth. I said, so you're in this new environment. So for me, it's difficult to get that kind of time to unwind. But recently back from holiday in Greece, and when you do get away, and it might take me a day or two to cool off or to wind down, and I'm not an intense character, but I always know that this is always something in the back of my head, which is always the business and kids. It's the same level as kids. Is that thing always in the back of your head? So it takes me a day or two to find out. But if you get that bit, you need 3 or 4 days, and then you can potentially listen to a business podcast and get some inspiration, or just think about life. And I found I actually thought a lot about what I want to do at later stages. So I definitely did get to switch off. And then what you can happen is you can wind back up as the holiday. But you need that holiday. I think I can't get away from this business in Ireland
Physical
or the
space.
UK. Yeah, because one of the big things about our business is there's no door to shut, right? So we're not running a butcher's where at 6 o'clock in the evening you shut that door metaphorically, physically, and everything. Our business is always on. I can get a call on a Saturday and we could have, something could have happened to do. And that's happening an awful lot less. However, the digital world is making businesses much more 24/7 and 7 days a week. E-commerce is clearly making retail 24-hour day, 7-day a week business, which brings its own challenges. So I think the point about business turning off and breaking up from your business for a little while is very linked to society and where we're going, how it's starting. It's very hard to turn off from anything right now. But I would 100% agree. You need, we can talk about cliches and recharging the batteries, but for me, that recharge piece is actually then what creates the next part of the journey. Because someone said to me years ago, like, if you're busy day to day, you don't have a business, you have a job. So it's very important to be in that helicopter viewpoint for medium-sized businesses that want to scale to the next level. Not in a physical helicopter, I'm not talking about Celtic Tiger Ireland here, but in metaphorically, where you can look down and go, right, this is what we're going to do next. And I think if you don't have someone in that role in the business, your business will not grow. And certainly for me, and I'm sure for Marissa, the aim is to consistently remain. Now, there's occasions where you have to get down on the ground and push and hard. And to go back to Marissa's point is right, is that when things are going well, that's time to be greedy in business. I know greedy is a bad word, but like to try and push hard when things are going well. Because what happens is humans have an automatic thing of taking the foot off the accelerator when things are
going well.
They really do.
Time
And
to
it's
relax,
like, if you can get as much fuel in the tank when things are going well, then you can, as Marissa alluded
When you get
to,
a bit of momentum going.
Totally. And then you can actually survive the bumps in the road. But one thing I'll say is that entrepreneurs, and I know Marissa's been in this point because she talked about going in and pitching to a big client meeting. Depending on how that goes, that is such a demonstrably huge effect and impact on the business that I think that's what separates, we'll say, business owners from staff at any level, is that in general, if you come in at 8 in the morning and you work till 6 or 7 in the evening, you'll have big swings or whatever. But an entrepreneur could have something that could disrupt a year's worth of plans in one day. And then you have to go home to your family and be the same person you were when you left that morning. That's becoming ever increasing a challenge, I think, for people who become more and more all in and their business is scaling. So for like medium-sized businesses that are turning, 8 to 10 million plus and want to take it to the next level, there's so many variables and there's so many things that can happen in a day that can disrupt the entrepreneur's mindset. I think you're in a scenario where the family and the people around them need to understand that this person can go in and out of big peaks and troughs. And that doesn't really happen in the startup phase. Startup phase is kind of, we're in it for the ride and we're pushing hard. And of course there's big swings in that, but for medium business, they're trying to scale up to much larger enterprises. Huge conversations, like Marissa mentioned, with suppliers and potential customers are just massive.
Okay. And it's interesting you mentioned, you have to go back to your family at the end of the day. I'm aware that both of you have quite young families, and Marissa, you have 2 young children now.
2
How
babies.
do you compartmentalize and let what Niall is referencing there, a big distraction that can disrupt you and take you mentally away? How do you shake that off at the end of the day and go home and be a wife and mother?
I think that, I
Undistracted.
heard this recently, that people expect mothers to work like they don't have children, and they expect mothers to parent like they don't work. And that rang true to me. I felt that in my gut when I read it. But I've done 2 things as my business has scaled that, as a mother and as an entrepreneur, I feel have helped me to manage that or to keep that balance. And the first thing is I have very short chains of command. So, there would be a very small number of people that would have my mobile number in the business and that would report directly to me, because I would feel drained if there was just too many people coming at me all the time for, little things to be decided on. So I've given it. Most of my staff have an awful lot of autonomy to make decisions, and look, if they make bad decisions, they make bad decisions, we'll handle it. So I try not to micromanage things as much as possible. And then the second thing that I've done is I've set very clear boundaries, and I try to set an example of working smart and not long. So for example, at the weekends, I see my weekend is sacred, and if an employee is contacting me at the weekend, I'm hoping that they're just asking if they can come over, enjoying the barbecue. Like I don't think that you should be contactable
Would you have a work
at
phone?
all hours.
And if so, do you turn it off?
No, do you know what? I have one phone. I've had the same phone number since I was 16.
Same. Yeah, 100%.
Well,
that's
for
in 16
I'm 20
maybe.
years.
It's not your phone number either.
I'm 20 years with the same phone number. So, yeah, they're the two things that I do. I set boundaries for when I'm working and when I'm not. Now, obviously, there's times in the business and in the week where it can't be helped. Something has to be handled on a Sunday night. But as much as possible, I try and say, look, lads, go and enjoy your weekend. We have staff to handle the social media and the emails at the weekend.
Switch off.
Switch off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for you, Niall, you had a young son at home when you went all in for the first time. Actually, tell us about that. How did you make that initial jump?
Yeah, so Max is now 10, but when I started the business, I had Max at weekends, son from a previous relationship, and I didn't want to be away from him for too long. So when I started JOE.ie, as it was then in 2010 in Galway, in the middle of like an unbelievable recession. People forget how bad
Year
it
two,
was.
it was pretty bad.
What's that?
Year two.
Oh
in
yeah,
2010, it was pretty bad.
And look, we're in, caustic enough kind of waters at the moment with Brexit on the horizon and stuff like that. So I quickly realised within a year I needed to move this business to Dublin. If you're trying to run a national media brand, you've got to be in Dublin, right? If you're interviewing Roy Keane or Colin Farrell or these people, they're not floating around the Ormore Business Park. Okay, they're in the Marion Hotel at a very specific time. So to run a media brand, I had to go to Dublin. So what I did is I literally just came up Monday morning and stayed in B&Bs and hotels for about 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And that is all in. That is not for everybody.
Suitcase living.
Yeah, totally. And to some extent, I'm still doing a lot of that, but an awful lot less. But I have, but that was a cornerstone of our business success. It was the right decision to take it to Dublin, but I couldn't commit to Dublin because I needed to be home at Max from, let's say, Thursday, and I have Max 4 nights a week now, and I've created an environment where I can live in Galway, and then I come up to Dublin to do stuff like this, or fly to London from Shannon to get to the business, and that's kind of getting that balance right. But then the beauty of it as it's evolved, obviously, is Galway is a great place to be in that helicopter because there's a Dublin bubble, and therefore if we're trying to run a business in London as well, I don't think Dublin is the right place for me to come back to, because all of a sudden, I remember coming back
You
one
need somewhere
evening.
neutral.
Well, it is. There's arts, culture, the sea, entertainment. Galway is not it's not a commercial city. It's a city that's powered by tourism and maybe foreign direct investment. So it's a great place to get away from media. But yeah, I had to make those commitments, definitely. And it was the right decision at the time, but I wouldn't have been able to, I'm going to Dublin and I'll see Max every second weekend, not in a month of Sundays. So, and actually for 2 years that journey, I was going back to Castlebar, where I'm from, and staying in my parents' house and picking up Max, So while I was going to B&B, so moved out of the house I was living in Galway to do that. And again, you don't even think, looking back, you go, Jesus, was that a and it probably was, but you just do whatever it takes
to make it work.
Yeah, within reason, to make it work. And that's not without, I'm talking about walking all over people when I say do whatever it takes. You do whatever it takes to make it happen, because
You make the
ultimately,
personal sacrifices that you feel you need
totally,
to make. Yeah.
because within very quickly, and I'm sure Marissa's definitely, I was doing this for Max, not for myself, and doing that for my future children.
And the
that's the way
things
it's
that you
gone.
both did, you presumably wouldn't have done without the safety net.
Or naivety.
Yeah, well,
One or
we
the
might be
other.
slightly different in this. Definitely, if there was a safety net, no, I just don't ever want to be attached to a safety net. I want to get to a place where I'm in a cocoon and it's definitely, you need to have financial freedom. So one of the challenges I think I'm facing the business now is, there will have to be at some stage an exit or a partial exit for me to become financially independent, because the entrepreneur, if all of their business is, if all of their wealth is tied to their business, then that's not necessarily a great place to be. And Marissa's possibly been through this journey once or twice, but for me, that's certainly where I want to get to be able to go back and become a buccaneering entrepreneur. Because what I'd say is an entrepreneur in their mid-20s is far more of a risk taker. When they don't have a family and they don't care where they live, they'll go to San Francisco in the morning to make a go of it, right? But as you go on, you become what I would say I'm a conservative, more conservative, but still an out-and-out risk taker. You still have to have that element. But what I want to get to is a situation where I can get back to being a little bit more swashbuckling in terms of my decision making and a little bit more, trigger happy. And you, if all your wealth is tied up to your business,
If you have too much to lose.
Too much to lose.
If you have too much to lose, your decision making definitely becomes more measured and your risk taking gets less and less. Like that's just what happens. Yeah.
And that's not a good place for the lead entrepreneur in the business to be when they're in that scenario, because it definitely impacts on growth and slows down. So I'm sure, like, and again, that's why like private equity exists as a concept in that it kind of usually allows the founder/entrepreneurs or founders to take money off the table to de-risk, as it were.
More freedom.
Pay off the mortgage, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, to go and then get back to running and driving the business.
Yeah. Well, on this topic, so when my husband 2 years ago took redundancy from banking after 17 years and came to work with me in the Coco Brown, now Carter Beauty business, one of the biggest concerns I had was that his financial experience and, knowledge, prudence, would start to impact the decisions that I would make and the risks that I would take. And just last year, we had, when I launched the makeup line, we had just under 500,000 units of product come in from the manufacturer in a week. And it was there was both of us, sat back and went, hope this works. So yeah, you do have to obviously take measured risks, but you still just have to keep taking risks if you want your business to grow. And I mentor with a group called Going for Growth, and one of the first things that I sit down and talk about with a group of 8 or 9 other women that are there at the table, one of the first things I do talk to them about is taking risk and what that looks like for you financially. Because I do think that women, and I hope I don't get murdered for saying this, but I do think that women are naturally more risk averse than men when it comes to financial risk, because I think we like to feel, we want to protect our family, we want to feel safe, and I think maybe more so now more than ever, we want to be more financially independent, and taking financial risks is something that I think as a female entrepreneur, I certainly have to push myself a little bit more to do it. Okay. I'll take more risks in every other way with the business, but the financial risks, I hold back a little bit.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Niall and Marissa, and do stay with us because in just a few minutes they're going to give us their one to watch in business this week. But next up, each week here on All In, we'll be speaking to a true Irish business trailblazer, someone who has really shown the courage, foresight and commercial chops to go all in on an idea they deeply believe in. The man I'll be speaking to next launched a little company called Storyful back in 2010, which he then sold to Rupert Murdoch's News Corp 3 years later for an estimated €18 million. He's now gone all in a second time with the launch of his company earlier this year called Kinsin. This week's trailblazer is Mark Little. Okay, Mark, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Let's kick things off with telling us a little bit about Kinsin. Why does the world need Kinsin?
So what I realized was, everyone had this manic moment around 2016 when Trump was elected, where you had these phrases like fake news and misinformation. And I was just leaving Twitter at the time. So I was looking around me, what's going wrong here? And I realized it wasn't just about truth, like there was too much misinformation. It was actually about trust. People had lost their connection to quality sources of information in their daily lives because it was coming at them constantly. So I was trying to figure out what to do next. And Kinsin is coming out of a conversation I had with my co-founder, Anya Kerr, and she was working for Facebook at the time. And we said, how do we reconnect people to the quality news in their daily life? They get up in the morning, They know that they've got news about their commute, they get to work, they're a professional, they've got professional news. By 11 o'clock, they're a foodie. So if we could reconnect people to quality news sources, that's the way we thought we could rebuild trust. So we built Kinsen, and what we're doing now is building technology that helps users personalize their experience of news and information, to build these kind of empowering connections with the people who produce the quality news and information in our lives. So it was very much kind of our experience as well in our previous life at Storyful, the first startup, trying to essentially recapture some of that wonderful, democratic, empowering spirit of the first internet, and mixing it with these great experiences we have in our apps, which help us create healthy routines of diet and exercise. We want to do the same for news and information.
And you're up and running at the moment. You've had some funding. Tell us about your journey, and I'm curious about the decision not to bootstrap.
Yeah, so we have, lucky enough, we've got the backing of what we call mission-driven individual investors from the United States, from Ireland, and also from Asia. We're about hopefully to close out the seed round now in the next couple of weeks and months. So we feel like we have what we need to go for it. And one thing I learned from my first time around as an entrepreneur is just be prepared to go big or go home. You know, for us, that is so important. You know, we know that the first time around we had some things we never managed to achieve. And this time around with Kinsen, for myself and for Anya, for the rest of the team, it really is about making an impact in people's lives every single day. So this is not about suck it and see what happens next. It's about a very clear vision of where we want to be for the next 6 weeks, 6 months, and 6 years.
I'm going to get you to contrast the two now in a minute, but let's go back to the beginning first. This show obviously is called All In. So many people now know you from Storyful, from Kinsen. Of course, plenty of people in Ireland still know you from your RTE days. Tell us about the moment you decided to leave RTE and go all in. It's funny, I actually was in RTE at the time. I had just arrived and you were just leaving, and I was fresh-faced just out of college, and the feeling in RTE and just generally that you would leave RTE and go all in on this new venture, it was as if you were Columbus and you were going to go across the ocean. We might never see you again.
It was worse than that. People thought I was on a mental breakdown. I have a very good friend of mine who's a very famous broadcaster who said, I was almost going to take you aside and have an intervention.
Have an intervention, right, okay.
Because people thought that was what was happening. It was like a midlife crisis.
It wasn't done.
It wasn't done, but it was also like, is he mentally unbalanced? And actually it's began, believe it or not, 10 years ago today.
Wow.
It was my first tweet.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. My 10th Twitter anniversary. And when I went on Twitter, I suddenly discovered that I could have a better connection to the people who are the audience. So when you're on television, right, you speak into a camera and nobody can talk to you. Nobody can answer back. Yeah. You don't really have an intimate connection. When I discovered social media, I suddenly realized that when I was going to interview the Minister for Finance, and remember it was the economic crisis back in 2009, I was asking people to give me questions that I could go into the primetime studio with. I was so excited by this idea that now the audience was actually part of the reporting team. They could speak truth to power. And that was a moment of exhilaration, but it scared the bejesus out of me because I was also a foreign correspondent, and suddenly I was looking at videos from places like Iran, way more authentic than anything I could do as a foreign reporter. So part of me was also scared. And so where some of my friends and journalists were seeing threats from social media, I just thought, what if you started from scratch with this wonderful democratic power? And with all these people saying and speaking and telling stories, what if we find the right people? And that was the beginning of the journey. And it's kind of like an infection.
Right.
You're all in because in some ways you have got infected by something. And I looked forward 25 years and said, I would always regret not doing this. And if it all goes wrong, I won't regret it. And that was the moment.
And people, when they talk about going all in, they often mention, the safety net. You have to get rid of the safety net. It's the only way you can really have enough skin in the game to push yourself harder. You, of course, would have had, am I right in saying you would have had a wife and children at home at that point?
Yeah, I remortgaged my house. I put everything, every penny I had. But in all honesty, like I realized something in my 10 years as being an entrepreneur. Everything I was told the first time out, and we're still told, is wrong, right?
Like what?
Well, I remember Steve Jobs' his famous advert from 1997 where he says, think different. It's always the crazy people who are the greatest entrepreneurs. That's not true. right? You can't be all in. You have to have some lifeboat that
Okay.
I'm taking a crazy risk, and particularly if you've got a family, you got to know what the worst case scenario is. People always say to you, and I said it to myself, failure is not an option. Not only is it an option, it's the secret to success is being able to embrace the possibility of failure. So if you haven't seriously sat down and said to yourself, what does failure look like? And that's okay. I can survive that. You should not be an entrepreneur. So
And
all
did you
in,
look at that? You
Yeah.
sat down and looked at that?
Yeah, probably too late. It was probably about a year in when I literally was. I remember one drive home for Christmas where I had refused angel investment that morning. I hadn't told my wife the business was over. And on a long drive to Galway, about sometime around Ballinasloe, the 15th time Chris Rea was singing Driving Home for Christmas, I said to her, it's all over. And it was only then that I'd actually contemplated failure.
Right.
And there was a kind of an exhilaration in it. Now, thankfully, my lead investor, Ray Nolan, didn't take no for an answer. And we worked it out, and the business, Storyful, survived, and I went forward. But it was that moment when I realized what failure looked like, and it was okay, that gave me the strength that sustained me, I think, even still today.
Well, many people might then think that you having the courage to do that a second time, you've just gone back all in now with Kinsin, may only have come from the fact that that story did have a happy ending. Do you think if you had said to your wife on that drive home, it's all over, and it really had been all over, and there had been no further paragraph added to that story, would you have gone back in a second time? Could you have?
I would have, I think so, because what you suddenly realize is I've been a top corporate executive. I worked with Rupert Murdoch, I've worked for Jack Dorsey, for the Irish taxpayer. Working for yourself and building your own team is a rare joy. I'm not great at managing upwards. I'm pretty good at building teams and giving people power themselves over their futures and hopefully inspiring them to do things that look around the corner. So that's been, I think, one of my only real natural talents in all of this. And the best way of employing that is to build teams. So I may not have gone out on my own, but I think I always would after that first time devoted my life to trying to build teams, lead teams, and eventually make people feel they have the power themselves. So that's what leadership is about, I think, is decentralizing power to people. So a great manager says, I know what I'm doing. A great leader makes the people in that room feel like they know what they're doing. And I've appreciated in my life that the greatest joy is building teams that build companies. And I think once I had that sort of experience, it was never going to be the same again, no matter how bad the failure was the first time around.
Is that as addictive as news can be?
Yeah, it's more. I mean, news is storytelling. It's about the idea of getting up and telling people who haven't experienced the visceral reality of a war zone what's happening behind you. Being an entrepreneur is telling people a story about the future. Something doesn't exist. Something people can't see around the corner to see it the way you do. So it's the same kind of thing. It's a storytelling tradition. And that's, for me, why there's such a similarity. There's one big difference. When you're a journalist, you kind of endure. You go to a war zone, spend a few days, and you get out. You're safe again. When you're an entrepreneur, you're never safe. So you've got to have a totally different mindset where it's all about resilience. Knowing every day you'll walk into work and you're going to get a kick in the head. And that's going to be okay. And being able to get over that and know you have the mindset to learn from your failures and learn quickly. And I think that's the difference between the reporting, the journalism, and what I do today, which is every day having little successes and little failures and navigating your way forward and hopefully upwards. So resilience is the key skill set that I always preach to young entrepreneurs.
And I guess this is kind of a related question. What will be different about Mark Little in Kinsin compared to Mark Little, founder of Storyful?
100 times more chill.
Very
not
good.
as wild, not as inconsistent. Sometimes when you're in that first journey, it's kind of manic and you're grabbing at everything and you're moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour and you mistake speed for certainty and consistency. So what I've learned over the years is that the true leadership, right, is about things like empathy, understanding people. It's about empowering those people. It's about actually self-control as well and self-awareness and knowing something about yourself and being able to regulate your own emotions because everybody looks to you as a leader. And if you don't have control over your own emotions, if you don't have that self-awareness and that empathy for people, then you're going to fail 9 times out of 10. And even the people who succeed being inconsistent and, you know, these ridiculously cliched ideas of an entrepreneur being a charismatic genius, that is bullshit, right? The great entrepreneurs are team players, team builders who maintain their composure, even when in their brain they want to jump out the window. And I think when I look back at my early self, I would recognize someone with a lot of passion, but not a great degree of control in how they channel that with people in the room, with them around them. So that's been my journey. I'd like to think also that I'm probably a little bit more chill about taking time to recharge as well, and to be a better person when I walk out the door, when I go home to my wife, my kids, my friends.
And you mentioned there your early self or your earlier self. What about your later self? I know you mentioned before your mentor and investor, Ray Nolan, and that he used to encourage you to consider the mark of 2025, the mark of beyond that. What do you think now about the mark of 2025? What does it look like to you?
Wow, that's a great question. When I look forward, I mean, I hope that, you know, in some ways I can look back at all the people that possibly I worked with, and I can take greater happiness in the things that make people around me happy and empowered. And that's something I must admit I didn't know at the beginning. I just obsessed about things that stressed me and stressed the business. And I think that the mark of 2025 was going to be a logical conclusion, hopefully, of the person I am today, which I'm taking a great deal more enjoyment and happiness when I see someone in my office or a friend or a partner or a client suddenly getting it and seeing the look in their eyes when they get happy about something that I'm doing or the team's doing. And so I think the market 2025 will realize the success in life is being happiest about the things that make other people empowered and happy, and being way less stressed about the things that you think are life and death decisions. Perspective, but also, like, as I say, this thing about radical empathy is connecting with people and understanding not just what they're thinking, but why they're thinking that, and helping them, you know, get to that point where they've got perspective. So I think that's the greatest joy for me every day as an entrepreneur, less about putting the numbers up, but at the same time, there's something great about getting that first client. You know, there's something beautiful about that pitch where you're seeing somebody who has absolutely no idea what you're talking about suddenly get it when the penny drops. And also a bit of, you know, I have to say, a little bit of affirmation when people look at you going, you're absolutely crazy. I have no idea what you're doing. And then a couple of years later, they go, oh, that was obvious from the beginning.
Yeah.
And when you're an entrepreneur, particularly with Storyful, it just drove me mad. People would say, I have no idea what you're doing, and they'd be very proud of it. And initially that drove me wild. And now I kind of take that a little bit more in perspective and go, well, I'm looking forward to coming back to you in a few years' time, and it will seem like the most obvious thing in the world.
Yeah. Well, the mark of 2025 sounds very chilled out and full of perspective. But the mark of 2019, of course, will be very much looking forward to your launch in September, I believe.
So we're now in a position where we're selling into companies. So we're a technology provider for a lot of the big publishers, conversations, brands, anyone who has a business that needs trusted information. We're now building the underlying personalization technology, and we're starting to see the first real test. So we're hoping that by September, October this year, again, it will seem completely obvious, while we're actually at the moment frantically in our attic space here in Dublin City building this engine. We're really looking forward to talking about it a bit more perspective and depth in September, October. But for now, I've been spending my time with this tiny team, and it's been an awful lot of fun looking into the future and trying to build it.
Well, all the best for the September launch, Mark, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again to check in with you how you're doing and how Kinson is going.
I hope so, yeah, and I hope we're not coming back to you to tell you the total opposite
You
I
won't
said today.
be. You won't
no,
be.
I'm sure it'll be.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great stuff from Mark Little there. Now, before we go, we're going to hear again from Niall and Marissa about their one to watch, what's big in business this week. Marissa, I'll start with you.
Yes, so my one to watch is Darren Kennedy. He is a very well-known television presenter who has spotted a niche, a massive niche in the skincare market, and he has launched a line of skincare for men. There's no one else doing it. I think that space is just ripe for the taking.
Male Marissa, that's what it would be done.
Do you know what? I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with the men of Ireland and their skin.
God knows we need it.
What about you, Niall?
So Tom Gannon and Niall McGarry are two guys that were heavily involved in the creation of the Fulfill protein bar. now left that business, and they, I think, have teamed up with Dawn Skehan and are creating a new product called Cali, which is a whole range of, like, they're in that health and fitness space again, that vegan crisps and snacks and what have you. So I think, given the guy's track record with distribution and getting those products in the shops, I think that's definitely one to watch. I love the food space. I mean, Ireland is probably leading the curve in terms of the switch away from traditional old industrial cooking and snacks into a kind of a totally new, like, when you go abroad is when you actually realise, crikey, like, Spain doesn't have anything like the products I get at home. So we've been market leaders in that, and I think the guys are onto something good. But the whole kind of healthy eating food space is just, there's so much happening there with Chopped and Sprout and all these guys, but these guys are two good operators, and I think I would definitely say they're my ones to watch.
Great. Okay.
And
So
that vegan trend, sorry to interrupt you, that vegan trend has definitely transcended now into the beauty space as well. So I'll be keeping an eye on their success.
Okay.
well, thanks to both of you. There you have it, Cali and Darren Kennedy's skincare range. And we'll be back, of course, with more one to watch for you next week. And that's it for the very first episode of All In. Thanks to my panel, Niall McGarry and Marissa Carter, Mark Little of Kinsin, our All In Trailblazer interview for this week, and thanks, of course, to you for being part of the programme. Thanks to our partners in AIB for backing All In. You can get in touch with us by using the hashtag AllInBusiness, and please subscribe so that you never miss an episode.